think people, because it is lunchtime, they kind of will trickle in at this point.
Okay.
Don Lamb, and if you guys kind of want to tell Don who you are and where you're at with your bees or not bees, or what he's setting up there.
I'm Bill Faber. I have bees.
Okay. Yeah. You are a beekeeper. Okay.
This is my first year.
Okay, so you're still a newbie. Okay.
I'm a new. Yeah.
Well, that's great because nobody knows more than a first-year beekeeper. So
Yeah.
glad you're here. You're Bill, right?
Yeah, Bill.
Okay.
I'm Jennifer, and I do not have bees. I hope to at some point, so I'm here to learn.
You're exploring?
Yes.
Okay.
I want to know what I'm doing before I get too far.
Okay. Okay.
I'm also Jennifer, and I could say the same thing.
This is going to be easy. Good, because I'm not good with names. Bill Jennifer twice, or Jennifer squared, whatever it is. Yeah. Okay. You guys.
David, we just got a hive a couple months ago.
Okay.
So.
May I ask, would you start with a package or a nuke, or
We started with a already
established hive?
established
Okay.
hive.
May I ask where you got it?
A
Local beekeeper.
local beekeeper.
Good enough. Okay.
I'm Bruce. I don't have bees, but
Your name is David. That's the only way I can do this.
I'll be David if you want. David too. I have friends who have had bees. So
Okay, so you're
I'm curious
exploring?
about starting up.
Okay, so you're like Jennifer?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. Let me see if I can grab the program that we want, and we'll go from there. Well, I've got something that's pretty general, because I kind of thought that's where we'd be today. I've used this one at the Grand Rapids Home Show a couple times, so it's slanted in that direction. Invalid. Didn't like that one. Remember PowerPoint? Is PowerPoint outdated or not yet?
Not yet, still here.
Okay. All right, here we go. See if it works. It does. Well, I apologize for being late. It was on the calendar, biggest life, just where it's supposed to be. But I'm a day late, and I looked at it. I said, "Well, that's tomorrow, not to worry." So, and you called me up and said, "That's today." You caught me off guard. I think you caught that. So, anyway, mind if I just sit down and talk to you? That's going to be a lot easier. Okay. We are beekeepers. We've been at it for, I think, close to 30 years now. We keep saying 20, but maybe I have to stand up for your sake. Okay. And I work with my wife. We have bees in Holland, and we have a little bee store. And so we're kind of the complete package if you're looking for some help or some guidance on stuff. But we live in Holland. We work as pollinators. That means we put our bees in blueberries and early fruits, and right now they're in farm market people. Holland Farmers Market needs our bees in there. If you ever been to the grocery store and seen a cucumber with a crooked neck or a squash with a crooked neck, that means it's not been pollinated completely. And so the guys who work in the farmers market need our bees in their fields to do a good job. So that's where we are right now. And we sell about 2 or 3 barrels of honey a year, so that's kind of where we are in that one. Most of it is our own, but we have other beekeepers that we work with say, "Don, we've got some extra honey. Would you like it?" So we usually buy it from them too. But we're honey producers. We should stop a minute and identify some buzzwords when it comes to honey. You're the beekeeper, right, Dave? Bill.
Yeah.
Bill. This is Dave.
Yeah.
That's Bruce.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again,
Bill.
new.
First year.
Yeah.
So you're
Months into it.
hoping to be a honey producer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, I split my hive this year, so I don't plan on getting.
You won't get any honey.
Yeah.
Okay. People ask you what your honey is. You know, you're going to find this out. And the words they often use are raw honey, or unfiltered honey, or unheated honey, Those are the buzzwords right now. And what that means is they're looking for honey that's the real thing in its original state. When you go to the big box stores like Myers or whoever else is selling the honey, the big box stores like it to be crystal clear when it sits on the shelf. They don't like it to crystallize, to turn solid. And so they superheat it to 180 degrees. They flash heat it. And that kills off the good guys that are in there. Kills off the pollen, kills off the enzymes and so on, the stuff that makes it really healthy for you. So when people ask about honey from beekeepers, they'll say, is it raw? Well, that means you haven't superheated it. That means it's unheated, filtered. We strain ours. When we harvest the honey, you end up with bits of wax in there and some bees' knees and wings and that sort of thing. So we do strain it, but we don't filter it and take out the pollen. And those are buzzwords people are looking for. I'm not sure they know what they exactly mean, the people who are asking, but they do ask for that. And then there's a new term I'm running into. It's called pasteurized honey. And I thought, how can you pasteurize honey? Well, that's the superheated stuff that you see in the big box store. So they superheat it. That's their way of calling it pasteurized. And so again, our raw honey is not pasteurized. People who want the real thing should go to a local beekeeper. That's the bottom line. Find yourself a beekeeper and buy it from them. Yeah. We have a self-serve on our back porch, and it's busy all week long. People just stop in our driveway and grab what they need and leave some money, and off they go, because they discovered that local honey tastes really good. Anyway, we sell honeybees to other people. That's kind of interesting, because when you start out as a beekeeper, you can buy the woodenware in several places, but you got to find a place to buy bees to put the bees in there. So that's one thing we do. We sell honeybees. And you bought yours as an established hive. You're Dave, right? What form is yours?
I bought a nuke.
You bought a nuke from someone. Okay. So both of you started with established hives then, where you just put it into your equipment and they grew from there. Another way to buy them is in a little cage. And you buy them by the pound. They sell 3 pounds worth. And that's about 10,000 bees. And that's what you guys got with your starters as well. If you buy it in a package, you put it in your hive and then it takes off and becomes a bee colony. So we sell those. We got into this kind of by accident. Everything happens by accident, I think, with us. I got into beekeeping because I read a book on it. I just said, remember PowerPoint. Remember books? I went to the library and got a book out on honeybees, and I read it and said, this sounds good. And then I went on a fishing trip, and my tent mate was a beekeeper. So the other guys fell asleep telling lies about fish. We fell asleep talking honeybees, and I came back home and bought some. And that was 25, 30 years ago. And we've had them pretty much since then. But the reason we sell bees now, we had them for ourselves as hobbies, just 5, 6 hives at a time. A friend of mine bought a bee factory down in Georgia. And he said, this is a good deal, Mike. We'll come down and pick our bees up from you and see the countryside at the same time. So we did. And other people found out about that. So they would say, well, bring some bees back for us. So we did. Pickup truck, then a panel truck, then a panel truck with a trailer. And now we're bringing them in by semi-load. So we bring in 1,000 of those packages at a time. And those are all pre-sold to beekeepers.
How many loads do you have come in each year?
We have a load and a half. So we sell 1,600 packages each year. And it's kind of fun because we're right in the middle of a residential area. I mean, we're right in town. And if you multiply 10,000 bees per 1,000 packages, you see how many bees we have in our yard at one time. And it's a whole bunch.
Boxed up, though.
They're all boxed up, mostly. We sell nukes also, and the nukes are flying until evening. So, and at one time I had literally 400,000 bees in my backyard flying freely, and the guy across the street did not know it. So that's how innocuous they are. Yeah, they don't bother anybody. So, anyway, I'm talking way too much. We sell, again, people would come to pick up the bees from our house, and they said, well, do you have any extra equipment for sale? And when the used stuff was gone, we said, maybe we better get some new stuff. And so now we sell the whole works. I mean, we sell every day beehives walking out of our house. So, and we're educators and mentoring. That's why I'm here today. We belong to the Holland Beekeeping Association. We are in a leadership position for quite a few years. When we started there, we had 15 members and met twice a year. Now we're at 500 members, and we meet every month. And it's not only Holland, there's a real interest in honeybees right now all over the place. And there are bee clubs all over the place, including Grand Rapids, that have good memberships. The Grand Rapids Club meets in various places. Their website is grb.club, grb.club. And I do have a telephone number contact if you'd like to reach them. They have a website. The website is for the most part kept up to date, I think, and it's a monthly meeting, and it caters to newbies. It caters to new people. So that's a good place to start and learn. And I'm on the state board of the state organization. We have about 1,000 members there. So that's kind of my background. And we can go from there. Okay, getting started. I already told you the fact that I read a book, and that's how I got into it. I like to stop here, too, because I find that in my audiences I have a beekeeper or two, and I have people who are interested, and I have some people who are scared of bees. So I usually stop and ask the question, who's been stung by a bee, and can you tell us about it? And that's going to include just about everybody. Young lady in the back just came in. What's your name?
Lynn.
No, you're Jennifer, because we got 3 Jennifers in a row there. I better stop that, because that's Bruce, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I got that one. And Alfonso, right? Dave. Anybody have a bee story to tell us about being stung or having unpleasant experiences or mowing the lawn and being chased by?
Lots of stories.
Yeah. I've only been stung once since I've been keeping bees, and when I split the hive, I think I was taking a little too long. And
Okay.
the smoke, I think, wore off, and I was being, I've found, and I've talked to people, if you go into a hive, you kill bees usually. Like whether when you're bringing a frame up or down, you smush them. So I think I must have angered them, and I just didn't have I had a single layer between my gloves and my top, and I just
They found it?
And I had a pretty big, I still can see it. It was a couple weeks ago, but I had a pretty local
Reaction to it?
reaction.
Did you scrape the stinger out right away, or did
Well,
it?
it never got in there because it was through the material.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's why you swelled up.
Right.
Yeah. I got we did a little field trip for kids yesterday, and I got stung here while I was working with the kids. We do field trips once in a while. I deliberately do not put my protective clothing on. I try to set a tone. If I don't wear a veil and don't wear gloves, they say this can't be too dangerous, and it isn't. And it was a sunny day yesterday, so I'm working in the hive with the kids. And I smoked it appropriately, a little smoke with a smoker. But one stung me right here. And the kids were all gathered around the hive, like here's the hive, and they're all right around this, about 10 of them. And so I said, look at that, I just got stung. And you could see the muscle on the stinger still pumping the poison in. And so I let it pump it in so the kids could see it. I don't know if you realize that when a honeybee stings you, the stinger stays in there and it rips out the muscle that injects the venom. And unless you scrape it out right away, it's going to keep injecting that. And so you don't want to squeeze it and pull it out because then you're just helping it get inside. But if you scrape it, you're cool. Okay. So because the kids were there, I just let it pump in there so they could see the muscle pulsing. And I looked at it, and it's a little puffed up this morning. So because I took an overload. But it's kind of interesting. Once you start working with bees, have you been stung too?
I've been stung in the past, but not since.
Not recently. Okay. You get used to it after a while. After when you first get stung, you say, "Oh, naughty word," but after a while, you say, "Ah, shucks, I got stung," and you get it out right away. So yeah. And I don't know if you're to that stage yet, but you get there. And I try to work as often as I can without gloves. You keep bees? You have bees?
Yep.
Okay. So you should be in on these sting stories
Oh,
then.
yeah, I've been stung many times.
Okay.
First time I had bees, the first time I bought them, I was putting them in. I, of course, had all the stuff on. But I have a cheaper suit, and the net was against my face. Right in the lip.
Oh, does that hurt?
First time. Oh, yeah.
It gets a little puffy too, doesn't it?
Yeah. No, actually, I don't get any reaction from it.
Oh, okay, that's good.
And then this past weekend, we had a couple over, and many stings in between there, but don't go out to the beehive with a glass of wine in your hand. He wanted to see the bees. I'm like, okay. He wanted to open them. I'm like, no, not right now. And I was probably standing from here to the box away from the beehive, and that wine just set him off. He just, and it was like.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay.
Either that or they recognized me.
Yeah. Well, and quite often there's one bee who's going to save the world for Beekeepingn, and they'll come out and bump you in the head. And if you get bumped once, you will be bumped twice. And if you don't take the second one seriously, you will be stung. Yeah, that's just the way it is. It's one bee has decided to save the hive, and she'll bump into you to say, go away. And if you don't go away, they say, sorry, gotcha. Okay, bee stories. Okay. Well, I like to just separate gentle honeybees. Got that nice word, gentle honeybees, from the grouchy cousins. And I do this on purpose, and I always tell the folks what I'm doing because honeybees are gentle. But the other ones give us the bad reputation. So this is a bumblebee. This is a hornet type. And there's another bumblebee. It's a carpenter bee, actually. And these two you recognize. He'll live in the ground. And if you're mowing the lawn, they'll come out and attack you for that. It's a yellow jacket. They build a paper nest up in the eaves or sometimes in the middle of a bush or something like that. And they're one of the characters that give bees a bad reputation because they're a stinging insect. Well, honeybees are stinging insects, so they must be bad as well. And so they make that application. She, it always has a bad attitude. Bald-faced hornet. They, again, live in paper nests. And in both of these cases, for the most part, they won't bother you unless they think they have a reason to. You can have them up in the eave of the house all summer long, and they'll fly back and forth and not bother you at all unless you disturb them or pose a threat in some way. I've experienced this guy. I walked into a garage once, and I think somebody else had irritated him before I got there, and straight across the garage, right here in the middle of the forehead, just like that. Instant headache. I couldn't believe how quickly it happened. And I left, of course, and we exterminated that nest. And then by the same token, I had one above my driveway for an entire summer, 15 feet up, never bothered us at all. So they're carnivores. They're good guys. They eat bugs, aphids, moths, grasshoppers, that kind of thing. If I see them, I like them. I watched a yellow jacket once attack 3 different cobwebs on the doorway, trying to get the spider out to take it home for food for the babies. You know, and they also eat fruit that's rotting, that kind of thing. They show up at picnics. They like your hamburgers. They like your pop because of the sugar. But they won't bother you unless you bother them. And the typical nest, that's made of wood, and it's turned into paper. It's beautiful. It's nice on the inside. Let's talk about bee sting. Anybody allergic to bee stings? Okay.
How would you know, like, if I had a local reaction, if it felt like it got big compared to...
I think it got larger. The reaction is good and normal. You want a reaction. I'm glad my hand got puffy because that means I'm healthy. Okay, that means you're healthy. I asked this question because you actually have a better chance of being struck by lightning than being totally allergic to bees, statistically. But so often when I ask a group, are you anybody here allergic, I'll get 1 or 2 hands, and they'll say, well, tell me about it before I acknowledge it. So you say that you reacted. So I'm saying, tell me about it. He said, well, you got a red spot. And I'm saying, you're normal. You're normal. There are 4 stages to being really, truly allergic to bees or wasps. That's a different venom in both cases. The first one is a local swelling like we have. The second one is a much greater swelling with some hives and whatnot. The third one is your throat kind of constricts. And the 4th stage is you're dead. So those are the 4 stages of being allergic to bees. Most of us have the local swelling, which is a good thing. If I'm stung by a yellow jacket, it itches for 2 weeks.
But it's not progressive.
Not progressive. That's the key thing, yeah. All righty. Typical hives. This is becoming the recognizable hive symbol for honeybees. It's actually illegal to use them, but it is the symbol. I have one of those painted on my shop floor just because it's kind of neat. This is the one you see all the time out in the fields. These are what my bees are in. My sample is here. This is where they are in the wild. This picture was taken in the Bahamas. So those are typical. These are illegal because you can't go in there. It's called a skep. You can't go in there for checking for diseases and whatnot. And because you cannot do that, they're not legal. It's the way they always used to raise them. We'd braid some straw together, and then when you had to harvest the honey, you had to break the skep apart and take all the wax and combs out and break them apart and get the honey from it. So that's the way they used to do it. Typical. And when we did lots of pollinating, that's what ours would look like. And you can see the pollen on the back of the bee. Pollen is protein for the bees. Nectar is carbohydrate, and they combine the two and make their food. So who are beekeepers? It's amazing. I gave you some numbers of how many packages we sell each year. And we just see names on a piece of paper. We have no idea what their occupations are behind that. But once in a while, their emails, addresses, will give it away. And so I generated this list from our emails, and you may see yourself up there someplace. Yeah, it's just a total mix. When you called me this morning, I was with an anesthesiologist, and we were talking bees. Well, okay, there could be a subgroup in Holland of about a dozen doctor types who are beekeepers. They have their own club if they wanted to. So, well, a typical colony. What's a colony look like? I've got a box here. A typical colony will have one queen, 50,000 workers, and that's about right now. We're at peak population right now, and about 300 boys. That's the population makeup of a hive. The queen bee has several specific jobs. You can see from the illustration she's larger than the other ones, a little bit longer. And I like to say she's a little bit better figured because she is a little more curved than the other ones, because when she lays an egg, she puts her back end down inside the cell, and she has to be shaped in order to do that. So that's why she has a little different shape. She maintains the morale because she does this last thing. She produces pheromones. It's a perfume. It's a smell. And if the queen smell is in that hive, the hive feels good. If there's no queen pheromone, no queen smell in there, the hive becomes very irritable, restless, grouchy. And if you walk up to a hive that is not queen right, they will let you know right away that something is wrong. And if they remain queenless for a while, then they become hopeless, listless, and they just kind of hang around and don't do anything. So she maintains morale for this. And that's a good thing, because each hive has its own smell, its own odor, reflecting the queen that's in there. And you gals know that if you buy the same perfume and put it on yourselves, it smells different on each one of you. And so the queen smells are all different. That means if we have two hives side by side, A and B, a bee flying from hive A cannot enter into hive B because she doesn't smell right. There are guard bees standing on the front porch, and if bee A lands on B's porch, and they go, "You're not in here, lady. You don't smell right. Beat it." And if she doesn't beat it, they'll kill it. Yeah, that's a good thing because A might want to rob out hive B, and hive B doesn't want that to happen. So they make sure that the smells are right before they get there. And her other job is to lay eggs. So that's what a queen bee does. And there's just one of them, and she keeps it going. The female worker bees, there are 5,000 of them. They do all the work in the hive. The boys don't do anything. And in 50,000 of them, they take care of the baby bees when the larva stage is happening. They feed that larva probably about 50 times a day, at least. They go to feed that larva as developing. They have house bees who dust and clean and make wax and make cells and take care of things. They have guard bees who stand on the front porch and keep the intruders out. They have mortician bees. Yeah, think about it. A bee dies inside the hive. What do? You can't leave a dead bee on the floor, right? So the other bees will pick that bee up and throw it up the front porch. Okay, it's a mortician bee. It's a necessary thing. Foragers out in the field on the flowers. Bees back at the hive who unload the foragers when they bring in the nectar, mix some enzymes with it and turn it into honey. And they do it all in the dark by touch and taste. Okay, think about that. All in the dark. All in the dark. So let's have a bee. Let's have a bee go out flying, foraging. It's a forager bee. Finds a really nice patch of dandelion. really rich in nectar, really rich in pollen. And she flies back home and she has to tell the others about that. Well, the problem is they can't talk. The hive is dark, and yet she has to communicate. She does that by, first of all, passing out samples of the pollen that she's come back home with. So she's have a taste, have a taste, have a taste. So they say, this is good stuff. This is dandelion. We're going to find this. But she can't talk to them and tell them where it is. But she can. Okay. There's a thing called the waggle dance. And she actually dances in a circle and waggles her back end and tells the other bees where the flower is. Because at a certain point, she'll cut a diagonal. And that diagonal is in relationship to where the sun is. They say, the sun is here. She's going that way. That means the dandelions are over there. So she has communicated in the dark, and the bees are huddled around her in a circle, feeling them with their feelers and just picking up what she's talking about. And if it's a really good nectar source, then she'll wag that tail faster and faster and faster. So the more value there is in the food source, the more excited she is. And if it's a really windy day, she'll also tell them how much fuel to take in their fuel tank so they can fly there and get back. And she'll also tell them where it is by the kind of waggle that she does. So in the dark, she's telling them what it is, where it is, how far, and how much fuel. Okay. And they go out and find it. So that's the thing called the waggle dance.
Do you work with these on a single function, or can they change those? Like if you were, are you born mortician bee?
That's a really good question. That's a good stock answer. Good question.
Oh, yeah.
That's a really good question.
Maybe there isn't an answer.
Okay.
If you don't know, it doesn't matter. I don't know. I've asked other people, and they don't seem to know.
I can answer it.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah. The summer bees live for about 6 weeks.
Uh-huh.
And 3 weeks inside the hive, 3 weeks outside the hive. The 3 weeks outside the hive, foragers.
Okay.
Their job is to fly back and forth and bring home water or nectar or pollen, whatever the hive needs. The other jobs inside the hive, they actually progress from brand new, taking care of baby bees and house bees. They'll graduate to being a guard bee or a mortician bee or something like that, as the need indicates or dictates. So it's a society just like ours. We all have different jobs, right? And our society wouldn't function if we didn't have those different jobs. Same with those guys. If they didn't have all these different jobs, the beehive wouldn't function. Well, what happens if somebody quits at your place of employment? Somebody moves in, fills the gap, right? Same thing with the bees. They'll move over and fill the gap as to what needs to be done. That means if they lose too many foragers because the dragonflies came through and ate them, some of the house bees will graduate to foragers at 2 weeks instead of 3 weeks because that's where the need is. Yeah, yeah. And the other thing that we can mention here too is the specialty of the bees is determined or influenced by who the daddy is. When we get to have the queen bee mating, we like her to be promiscuous. 15 or 20 matings is great. 10 or 15 is normal. The more she mates, the more subfamilies we get. And so we like her to be promiscuous for that reason, so we have a good mix of subfamilies. Yeah.
Is that a hive getting ready to swarm, or is that just an overpopulated hive?
Where's that? Here? He's looking at this mass of bees on the outside. You don't see it that full that often. They're on the verge of swarming because there are that many, but most likely it's a really hot day. We get a 90-degree day. I'll walk out to my beehives and I'll see them all over the front that way, all over the front porch. It's just hot in the house. So they're all standing outside the yard is what they're doing. Yeah. But what Kurt is referring to, that if the hive becomes too big, too many people living there, too many bees in the beehive, half of them will leave and start their new place. It's called a swarm. I think we have a shot of that later on. And why do half of them leave? Because they have to reproduce the entire society to function, right? So we produce by producing just one at a time. And that one grows up and can make it. Well, a single bee can't make it. So for a beehive to reproduce, it has to reproduce its entire society. That's why half of them leave and find a new place to live. And they take the old queen with them. So they need a queen, right? So they take the old queen with them. That means that the new hive has to have, or the hive that's left behind needs a new queen. Well, 3 weeks before they decided to swarm, they said, we're going to swarm in 3 weeks. Let's start a new queen. So they do. They start a new queen for the group that's going to be left behind. The swarm goes away, and the next day, the new queen hatches. So God's way of just keeping nature going the way it's supposed to be. Yeah. Alrighty, male bees, only 300 as needed. They're somewhat lazy because they don't do anything, but they're welcome anywhere. They can go from hive to hive to hive. And they walk in and say, hi, girls, I'm hungry. So the girls feed them. Okay, and then they walk around and they go off to another one and say to the next one, I'm hungry. They get fed again. Their only job is to mate with the virgin queen. And there aren't that many virgin queens available in the year-round process. Swarm season is May, and then during the rest of the summer, not many swarms at all. So if you're unlucky enough to be born a drone in August, your chances of getting lucky are really small. Okay. And along with that, if you're lucky, you're really not lucky. Because once you mate with the queen, you die. Okay. So that's why I say she mates with the virgin queen, and he dies. That's his life. He flies around and lives for as long as they feed him and take care of him. And if he's lucky, he dies, or if he's not lucky, he dies. And in the fall, to go with that, let's think about this. His only job is to stand around and eat, or walk around and eat. In the fall, there are no virgin queens to mate with. No queens. I bet we don't need any drones then, right? In the fall, in September, if you go out to your beehives, you'll see that the girl bees, the worker bees, are taking the drones, throwing them off the front porch. They don't need them. They can make some new ones in the springtime. See you guys. And if the guys come back on, they throw them off the front porch again. Len.
The drone bees, when they mate, do they die, just automatically die, or do she kill them?
You had to ask that question. Well, these are all adults. My wife took me to task yesterday. We had some 14 and younger kids, and I told the same story. She said, you can't tell that to kids. What happens is that when she mates with the drone, she actually rips out his reproductive ability. And that becomes part of her body. So she has a little sac in there called a spermatheca. And she can store 3 million sperm inside her body for her lifetime. So when she mates, it's ripped out immediately and becomes assimilated into her body. And, and she does that 15 times, we hope. So there are 15 dead drones to go with that. And and then she has a lifetime supply of sperm. And when she lays an egg, the egg comes down one chute and the sperm comes down another chute and is fertilized and deposited in a cell. Yeah, and so it's remarkable. I mean, all by chance, right? Remarkable. And if it's going to be a drone bee, if she needs to make a drone, it's not fertilized. It's a biological thing if you're into biology, haploids and all those discussions, which we won't get into. But so that's kind of how that works. And so, no, he's ripped apart, and it's the dust. Relative sizes of the three. This is a worker. This is a drone, big old blocky thing. And the longer, slimmer, better figure I said on the queen. She doesn't come with a color on her head like that, but it's easier for beekeepers to find them back. So you can actually order queens with a mark on their head. And this happens to be a green ear. There are blue ears and yellow ears and red ears and so on. 5 different colors because they can live up to 5 years. And so that's the way they do it. You notice these guys, I think they have either 5 eyes or 7 eyes. The male has just 2. And they're up on the top of his head and they're big. And what I say, they have big eyes because they stand on the corner watching the girls go by. Literally. That's why they have the big eyes. They, oh, there's one. Go get her. And so that's why they're made the way they are. Stages of development. They start out as an egg. They develop into a larva. They're capped off so they can pupate. And then they hatch out a full-grown adult bee. A little fuzzy. They grow a little bit after that, but that's kind of their stages of development. Now the queen bee, she's special. She gets her own special kind of cell. It's peanut shaped and it's actually about that long. And she gets a special food called royal jelly for her entire larva stage. That's significant because the other bees don't get that special treatment. So she gets the special rich food that the bees make from their own bodies to feed her with. She hatches in 16 days, lives for 3 to 5, and she's an egg-laying machine. How many eggs a day do you think she lays? You beekeepers know that? 100?
I'm gonna say more. I don't recall. Thousands.
1,000 a day. Yeah, she'll lay 1,000 a day. 1,000 a day? Sometimes 1,200 a day. That's 500 an hour. Oh, no, it's 50 an hour, something like that. Anyway, a bunch. And she wears out. The other bees will say, well, Mom's not doing so good anymore. She's not laying so many eggs. And so they'll make a new one. It's called supersedure. Okay. So if she's not doing well after a year or two, say, make a new queen. Throw this one away. That's called supersedure. And swarming we already talked about. So, okay. Worker bees do all the work around the house, sweep the floors, make the honey, go out foraging, feed the babies, repair stuff. It's the whole works. They're raised in a regular cell. They get royal jelly for just 3 days, and then they're switched over to bee bread, which is a combination of nectar and pollen. They hatch in 21 days. Oh, how long did it take the queen to hatch?
16.
Queen hatches in 16 days. How long does it take a worker? You guys are awake, right? Okay. 21 days. Okay, she lives for about 6 weeks till worn out. She does all the work, has 5 eyes. Okay. She's the pollinator, and she orders the queen around. I didn't cover that point before. The queen doesn't even decide how many eggs she's going to lay. The workers decide that for her. If it's a really good floral season and the flowers are really starting to bloom, they'll say, we need more help around here, so they feed her more food. Okay. And in August, when there aren't so many flowers around, they say, we don't need so much help around here, don't feed Mom so much. And so they cut back on the food, and she doesn't lay as many eggs. So she doesn't even make that decision herself. The others make it for her. Well, the drone bees, they're raised in a little oversized cell, not as big as the queen cell. They get royal jelly for 3 days and then bee bread. They hatch in 24. They live for a season. We talked about their being thrown off the front porch when they're no longer needed. 2 great big eyes, and they're welcome anywhere, and they mate and die. Okay, so how many days to hatch? Jennifer, you're just smiling. You're not answering me. Either Jennifer.
21.
No. 24. The other one was 21. All right. How long the queen? 16. Okay. There's the relative sizes of workers and drones and shapes, and you can see the eyes. Honeybee mating, we talked about that. We didn't talk about something called a DCA, Drone Congregation Area. The drones go up and patrol the streets in a certain area. It's usually flanked by some trees and stuff like that, up to 10,000 in one bunch. And they're just up there waiting for a virgin queen to come through. And it's called the Drone Congregation Area. And the drones can fly for a half an hour. So they tank up with honey from whichever hive they're in. They go to the DCA, and they patrol back and forth, hoping for a virgin queen to come through. And just before their half hour runs out, they go back home and refuel again. So if it takes them 10 minutes to get to the DCA, they have 10 minutes on patrol, and then 10 minutes to fly back home again. So theirs is not a very rich life. Building blocks of the hive. You guys are acquainted with this, so I'll skip you. I'll just start with Bruce here. That's a frame that's the furniture that's in here. And there's beeswax foundation on that. And when you look at it, smell it, it smells really fun too. You can see the engraving or the impression on there. That is actually telling the bees where to make the cells. So that's our way of manipulating and controlling and leading the bees into doing what we want them to do. Didn't always do that. When we went back to the skep days, they made them all by themselves. But since the movable frames came into vogue, this is much easier for us. They were invented in the 1860s, right after the Civil War, by a minister. And he worked with the movable frames and something else called Bee Space, and we're still using his stuff today. It's international. Okay. Building blocks of the hive, you can see some larvae in there, and that's some capped cells, and that's where you didn't have any foundation. They did it wherever they wanted to. That's probably inside a eave of a house someplace where they just did it all by themselves. Before we go further, let me just open this hive up. This is a typical hive that it's a model I like to take with me. I have one of these in my shop at home because it's so much easier to visualize something. I don't know if you're visual like I am, but I like to see it. So this is the house. The light blue chamber is the brood box. It's a little bit deeper than this one. This is the honey box. They're called, the official word is a super. This is a deep super. This is a medium super. And there's another one called a shallow super. It's relative to the size that they are. Well, a good beehive has 2 deep supers for brood chambers. So when you work with bees quite a bit, it's a deep box, medium box. It's all the same thing. This is for the babies. This is the pantry. This is the kitchen. This is where they store the honey. She likes about that much room. Well, this is the house. It's got a basement floor. It's called the bottom board. It's got a roof, just like your house has a roof. It has a ceiling. The ceiling here is called the inner cover. This is the outside cover, inner cover. And then inside the house, you'd want some furniture, of course. So we have these kinds of things are called frames. This is the furniture. We put some starter wax in there, and then the bees know where that we want them to do things. The nice part about having the movable frames is when I talked about the bee skep, I said they had to break it to get the honey out. Well, these are so nice. You just take them out, you cut the face off so the honey will flow, put it in a centrifuge called an extractor, spin it, and the honey comes out. And there's a whole bunch of wax that goes back, and we give it back to the bees again. They refill it. So that's the honey box. Same thing with the brood chamber. We have these. In fact, that frame that I passed around is from a brood box. Same thing works here. Let's say that this is full of larvae, or that's full of capped brood, ready to hatch, and I have 2 hives, and one is really good, and the other one's kind of weak. Well, I'll just take one of these from the really good one and put it in the really weak one, and these bees will hatch out in this one, so I've made this one strong at the same time. So that's the beauty of these interchangeable parts. And they're called frames. And for years and years and years, we used real beeswax, like the one that I passed around. And wouldn't you know it, now we're using plastic as well. Plastic that looks just like that, only it's wax coated. Thanks, Lenny. You've seen these, right?
Yeah.
So this is a typical beehive. Now we should talk a little bit about this ceiling too. Why would you have a ceiling on a beehive? Seems like you just put that cover right on and life would be good, right? Just one more extra piece. Except that those bees are little stinkers. And they make something called glue. Propolis is the proper name. Glue. And the way it works is they're really fussy about how much headroom they have. 3/8 of an inch, a bee height. And if it's not a bee height, they're going to fix it. If it's too much, they'll fill it full of wax. It's called burr comb. If there's not enough, they glue it, the little buggers. So we try to have enough space between the top of the frames and the ceiling, the inner cover, put it on here like this. But often, they decide that isn't right. So they'll go to a tree and get tree sap and come back and make propolis, make glue out of it. And we pop the top cover off, we try to get this off, and it just won't come because they've glued it down. Now the problem is if you use this cover and they glue it, there's no way you can get it off unless you break it. You get a hive tool in there, like a little pry bar, and it actually breaks before the glue lets go. But if you use this inner cover, you can nicely get your cover under there, your tool, and pry it out, and it works. Okay. So this helps honor the idea of that 3/8 of an inch. It's called bee space, and it sure helps the beekeeper out when you don't have to break them all the time. So that's why that's there. So sometimes when they glue the 2 boxes together, I can pick up the top box and the bottom comes with it, and the basement floor, the bottom board comes with it because the glue is so good. Called propolis. Pollination, all this fuzzy, you know how it works. There are little hairs all over the body of the bee. They're electrically charged as they fly through the air. They pick up an electrical charge, which is the opposite of the electrical charge that's on the pollen. So they land in the flower, and the pollen kind of jumps to the bee, and the bee rubs over it and everything like that kind of thing. And she becomes covered with pollen. She's got little combs on the back of her legs, and she combs herself and tucks it into her saddlebags, her pollen sacs, and flies back to the hive, and one of the house bees unloads her. So she's there flying to the flower. A couple of examples or pictures of that. Yeah. So the reason we like to go, or orchardists like us to go in there, is because the bees will pollinate those flowers. The fact that goes with that is pollination is the one agricultural input that increases yield. It determines how much of the fruit you get. You get more apples if they're pollinated. You get more blueberries if they're pollinated. Now, water and fertilizer will make them bigger and better, but not more of them. Okay, so that's the one that increases the number of fruits. Look at that. That's a beautiful sight to a beekeeper. Without pollination, 1 bite out of 3 would disappear. Got lots of people eating there. I like this one. With pollination, without. Look at the empty shelves. 1 bite out of 3, so next time you walk through the supermarket and produce department and say, look what the bees did. Talk about a typical beehive. Starter hive, these numbers are low. If you're going to get into bees, you're going to spend about $500 the first year. It's upfront because you have to buy a box, and you have to buy some bees, and you have to buy a bee suit. You have to buy a smoker to settle the bees down, that kind of thing. But even that's cheap for a hobby, right? If you went bowling, bowling $500 a year, or golfing $500 a year, or quilting $500 a year, or boating. So it's really a relatively inexpensive hobby. And if you lose all your bees in the wintertime, $100 puts you back in business because you can use that stuff over again. So those are the costs. Commercial break. The Grand Rapids right now is working with an urban agricultural committee. There is an ordinance in Grand Rapids that allows bees within the city limit, but you have to be 200 feet from the property line. 200 feet? How many people have a lot that big? So there's a committee working on that right now to change that. There are some websites for things that we work with, and so on. So, questions? I've been rattling. See ya.
You mentioned something about like a hive not having a queen, and they kind of lose whatever the motivation, or it'll collapse ultimately.
Yes.
How would you know if it didn't have a queen?
You look for evidence of the queen. You look to trying to find her herself if
Right,
you can.
If you can't find her.
She's hard to find sometimes.
Yeah.
Then you look for eggs, or you look for larvae, or you look for capped cells.
And how long would they go on if they didn't? Would they just go on until it? I mean, if you're seeing like activity of honey producing and stuff like that, is there a queen in there or not necessarily?
The thing I usually look for is I'll look at the bees landing on the front porch, and if they're bringing in pollen, lots of pollen, you have babies, because they need the pollen for the babies in particular. If they're bringing in mostly nectar, and if you pull the frame out and you see it's got lots of liquid in it, and they're not stockpiling nectar as much, then you start looking for other signs. And then you would look for eggs and cells, or you look for larvae, you look for capped brood. How long would they go? Well, capped brood takes 21 days. So if you have capped brood in there, you've had a queen at least 21 days ago. You have live larvae in there, it's not capped, you had a queen at least 10 days ago. If you have eggs, she was there at least 3 days ago. So if you have none of that, 6 weeks after the last hatch, you're going to die out. Make sense? Did you follow all that?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
When I split, I'm pretty sure I had a queen in the bottom one.
Okay.
And I put a new queen in the top one.
Okay.
Right? So, yeah.
And did you leave them together?
Just overnight.
Okay.
And then I split them the next day.
Okay.
I put a clean, I shook everything down into the bottom
Yeah.
brood box, and then I put a clean excluder.
Uh-huh.
Put the next box on. I made sure there was brood in both boxes.
Uh-huh.
And then I put the clean on the top one, the new clean.
The new queen.
And then
The next day?
No, that day, and then I
Oh.
split them.
Okay.
Wait, no. Yeah, I put it in that day, and then I split it the next day.
Okay.
And I'm just hoping there's a clean in the bottom. But there's a lot of activity. This was a couple weeks ago now.
Okay. Look for some cat brood.
I saw some cat brood last time I went into it, about a week after.
You're good.
Okay.
You're good. Okay, that's kind of how far we go. We can talk about honey, and when I do this presentations in some other setting, I bring some honey samples with me, and didn't happen to do that today, but let's talk about honey. I like this. Winnie the Pooh says, the only reason for making a buzz that I know of is because you're a bee. And the only reason for being a bee that I know of is for making honey. And the only reason for making honey that I know of is so I can eat it. And isn't that typical Winnie the Pooh? And this is mine. Honey is nature's perfect food, a delicious distillation of sweet nectar blended with enzymes from the bees, reflecting back to the very flowers it came from. That last line is important, reflecting back to the very flowers it came from. Have you ever noticed that honey comes in colors? If you look at this, these are all honeys, but look at the range from dark to very light. The honey reflects the flowers it came from. Each flower has its own unique taste. So if I were to taste honey that came from the blueberry fields, it would taste different from the honey that came from the dandelion fields. It wouldn't taste like blueberries. It wouldn't taste like dandelions because that's not in there. But it would have a different taste. Spring honey is usually the light honey. This is probably close to spring honey. This is maybe mid-season, and this is from goldenrod in the fall. Now, which one do you think would be the more mild and which one the more robust? Lynn says dark robust. You're right. Yeah. This is the one you are most used to. This is the one you're going to see on the grocery shelves. This is the one you have to get from a beekeeper, probably reflecting goldenrod or buckwheat or something like that. It tastes even like molasses. It's really strong. But a real variety. It's kind of fun. Maybe you've seen some of the publications talking about a thing called a flow hive, where you have a beehive and it's got a little plastic honey super on it with all the little plastic frames, and you can just turn the handle and the honey runs out. You've not checked into the flow hive yet? Yeah. Google flow hive. I've had people show up at our place with their flow hives and say, what do I do with this thing? And we say it's great for a second-year beekeeper or a third-year beekeeper once you know what you're doing. But I've seen them after the end of the season, and I've looked in those cells, and there are different color honeys in each one. It's just fascinating. I think it's really neat because the bees filled the early spring, and then they moved right through the season, and they end up with a dark one, so you can choose your flavor. Yeah. And, a lot of people go on vacation and buy postcards. Here's where we were. We go on vacation and buy honey and bring it back home again. So I like what Emily Dickinson says, the pedigree of honey doesn't concern the bee. A clover, anytime to her, is aristocracy. So the bee finds clover, she's happy.
Have you ever seen the blue honey from South Carolina?
What kind is it?
It's blue.
Blue. No.
Something with that, whatever they're taking in and the enzymes, turns out it's apparently one of the only places you can get it. And it's the only place,
It sounds interesting. We've had sourwood honey out of the Smokies, out of the Carolinas. They produce a lot of it there. And, different honeys in different places. The most interesting honey I've had is from the Bahamas. I go to the Bahamas once in a while to teach beekeeping classes. Isn't that rough? And with all the different kinds of flowers they have there, we have one that's really fruity and really sweet. It's just incredible stuff. It's not pictured up there. And we hoard that one. We don't share that one very much. But then on the other hand, when we were picking up bees in Georgia one time, a friend who drives down with me in our truck we have to eat when we're down there. So we stopped at a restaurant and biscuits and whatever. We said, well, you could have some honey to go with us. Yeah, okay, so they went and got some honey for us, and we put it on our biscuits, and we looked at each other and said, this is awful stuff. It didn't taste good at all to us. And so later that day, we're at dinner then. This was lunchtime. We're at dinner with our supplier. And I said, Mike, we had some honey this noon. It was just terrible. We got it at such and such a restaurant. He looks at us and smiles a little bit and says, that's my honey. So he had sold the honey to the restaurant, and we are criticizing it. But what it tells us is that we up here eat this stuff, and this is our accustomed taste. The stuff down there was cotton honey. It was from cotton plants, and it had a different taste and a different aftertaste, and we didn't cotton to it. So we said, this is terrible. That's my honey. Oops, sorry about that. Yeah, so when you get a chance to taste different honeys, do it, yeah. Honey, if it's unadulterated, does not have to have an ingredients list on it. Our honey, when we sell it, says pure honey. But if you buy orange blossom honey or lemon lime honey or something like that, you can get those in the southern states. They've added just a bit of flavor to it. So read the ingredients, and they'll tell you. If it's the pure stuff, it should say pure honey. The FDA, I think it is, in its indemnito, that's wisdom, has decided that labels on honey should say there might be something else in it. So it might say 99.99% pure. And so people are saying, now, why can't we buy pure honey anymore? Well, you can, but they're just trying to cover themselves. So if you read a label that says something like that, it's probably pure honey, but it has to have that label on there. Some places provide honey, and but it's not totally honey. Like Bob Evans is all honey. That's a little darker stuff. If you eat a Bob Evans, ask for honey and taste it. It's going to be between those two. It's a little stronger flavor. If you go to KFC, Kentucky Fried Cardboard, and ask for honey, it's really it's honey sauce. It's not even honey. Okay.
Yeah, it's true. I've read the ingredients.
Yeah, it's not honey. Yeah. Trader Joe has some interesting international honeys if you shop there. Yeah. So, okay, I think that's as far. I think the next one says, let's taste honey, but we can't do that. Oh, so this is good, too. At one time, honey was a trading commodity for medicinal purposes. And all of these things are true. When our daughter's kids were small, 3 boys, active boys, and they got an owie, she would put honey on the Band-Aid and then put it on because it did a better job than Neosporin.
Really?
Yeah. It reacts with the moisture in your body, turns into hydrogen peroxide, and heals faster and works better. And we were doing a trade show in Grand Haven one time, and the booth next to us was an OB nurse. And someone had a C-section, and it wasn't healing up. So the doctor said, put some honey on it. They did, and she healed right up. So it's amazing. And plus all this other stuff. Antibiotic, slow sugar release, so it's a better thing for athletes. Anemia builds up your blood. Antibacterial qualities. If we have coughs, we take honey. Yeah. Heals wounds, helps ulcers, lowers sugar, stabilizes. And I've heard there's a honey diet as well. So I don't know how that works, but if you're so inclined, Google it and find out. Okay. I get a diabetic question once in a while, too. Can diabetics eat honey? Yeah, it's the same as other sugar. Well, actually, it's better for you because white sugar has to go through a stage of breakdown to get where honey is. So honey's really more broken down than white sugar is, and then it's easier to digest. But it's still sugar. So if you're diabetic and you're using honey, it's still sugar. So it doesn't change that part of it. Okay, so how much honey does one bee make in her lifetime? A lot of profane silence on this one. Profound silence, profound. The answer is 12 bees, 1 lifetime, 1 teaspoon. Yeah. Does that blow your mind? We buy it, Okay. How do you taste honey? We've gone to honey tasting things. They have college courses on how to taste honey. And We went. We had a gal from France who was at a state meet, and she was leading this class. She gave us a wine glass with a sample of honey in it, and swirled it around as if it were wine, and then we smelled the odor, and we could smell the different floral sources in there and the taste of that honey, and it was amazing that you could do that. And then we taste it and let it linger on our tongues and so on. So sight, what does it look like, what does it smell like, and then what does it taste like. I've had some honey from Grand Rapids downtown that tasted like diesel smoke. It was really bad, and because she was downtown with her beehives. And yet the year after that, I had some of her honey all over again. It tasted good. So wherever the bees were that day is going to be when it's fun. And pleasant words are, as a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and health to the bones, from Proverbs. Any questions? I've talked quickly. I hope this is what you wanted, Kurt.
It is.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's got a bunch of great pictures and stuff up here. If you guys want to look before it takes off. Don, would you be willing to come back again for maybe a follow-up?
Sure.
At some point? Okay. So anybody have any questions or?
We should maybe talk. Bee school happens. If you're interested in bees, you can take Beekeeping 101. And those usually happen in February, March. Holland has one almost always the first Saturday in February. Kalamazoo has one like the second Saturday in Feb. Albion College has one the last Saturday. They're happening around the state. On the state level, we have them in March. And I don't know if the Grand Rapids Club has offered a bee school per se. They're kind of moving down the road. They might in that direction. But having said that, if you want to set something up, we can make a bee school happen.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
How much interest we get? Maybe.
Yeah. Cost on the bee schools is usually around $50 for the day. And you can walk in not knowing anything and leave being able to start your own beehive. Yeah, yeah. The learning curve for beekeeping is like this, and I'm at the elbow. But if you join a bee club and work with other beekeepers, it's really doable. And if you have one hive or 100 or 1,000, doesn't make any difference. We'll all have the same questions, the same issues, you know. And it's farming, it's livestock, so there are challenges, opportunities, but it's addicting. And I tell this over and over again. There's one piece of equipment that you need as a beekeeper that we don't sell, but you can get at Lowe's, Menards, Myers has them. Lawn chair, because you will sit out there and just watch these things. And you look at me and say, Don, you're crazy. And then the people come back and I say, well, how's the lawn chair? Glad we got it. So, yeah. Yeah. So it's really great. So.
Thank you very much. I will have a video that I'll share with everybody. I'll post it somewhere and just share a link or whatever for today for yourself to go back to or later on. And I'll send out a note to see where we want to go to everybody that signed up for this and who responded to the emails. So thank you very much. Thanks, Don.
You're welcome.